I'm Len Gillette. I'm the president of the Silicon Valley chapter of AAII. We have as our second speaker, John McCamant. He's editor of the Medical Technology Stock Letter.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is John McCamant. I'm editor of the Medical Technology Stock Letter. I am live from foggy San Francisco, speaking to the Silicon Valley American Association of Individual Investors. I'm guessing we have some sunshine your way today. One of our focuses today will be obviously the COVID-19 virus impact on investing, and specifically we're not excited, but it is a time that we're seeing the tools and the potential prowess of biotechnology coming to the forefront throughout the world as we're providing some of the answers to what looks like a very difficult situation. MTSL and BioInvest is our website. Bioinvest.com. We believe is the best tool for understanding and investing in biotech stocks. We believe this is a long-term process. As Lynn started, as educated, he started in college. It's an ongoing process. We provide you a continuous flow of information, and our goal from all that information and education is to profit from biotechnology. BioInvest, we believe, is a one-stop shop website that answers all of your biotech industry questions, past and most importantly current, and what we see going forward. Today's presentation, overview of MTSL, what the Medical Technology Stock Letter brings to the table for our subscribers, some biotech metrics as we go through what is the biotech industry exactly, and picking biotech stocks in the COVID-19 era. We'll talk about specific components of the virus, what we know, what we don't know, where potentially some of the opportunities are. Lastly, we'll discuss platform technologies, and we'll go through three of our recommended stocks that we think are particularly attractive at this point in time. Lastly, we hope you will want to subscribe after coming through this entire presentation with us, and we'll provide some more bullet points on what we think is important to invest in biotechnology. The newsletter uses a model in a trader's portfolio. We have long-term horizons, particularly given the long-term cycle of drug development. Some of them can come to the market as quick as 5 years, but more often than not, we really are looking at 10+ years from discovery before you make it to the market. We want to mix our investments in the biotechnology space through three different tiers: first, second, and third. These are all based on the relative risk and market capitalization. Tier 1 companies are Gilead is someone that's been very prominent of late, all the way up to the Amgens of the world. Tier 2s are some of the smaller companies, but are not the small ones, the mid caps. Nectar, NKTR, Aspirion is another classic mid cap. And then the small cap are companies generally below $1 billion to $500 million or even lower. And we have multiple companies in that space. Historically, we've done very well in the tier 3. We need to balance that. They are the riskiest, but they also have the largest long-term performance. 7-year performance, 32% in the model and 62% in the traders. That is per annum. We're very proud of those numbers. In 2013, we had an outstanding year, and we're and it's delivered some of the most best performances. Holbert Financial Digest does not track the industry anymore, but they were an incredible source when they did. 2016 was the only year out of the last 7 with a negative return, despite significant negative or sector volatility throughout the last years. That's a quick snapshot of the different calendar years going back to 2013, 2015. You can see our performance has been very good year to date. We're both slightly negative, but we're certainly bouncing and turning things around here as COVID-19's impact has been minimized of late. Who is the Medical Technology Stock Letter? Is myself, John McCamant, and my partner, Jay Silverman. We believe a biotech analyst team is important in this space to have more than one person picking the stocks. Together, we have over 60 years of analytical experience, objective analysis. We do not get paid by anyone within the industry, no banking fees. Early recommendations have become leading companies. Insight was a leading recommendation in the single digits. It's now almost $100. BioMarin is a local company that we were able to pick up at a low price. PCYC was one of our greatest recommendations ever at $17 in the 300s on a big buyout. Celgene, Genentech was another historic recommendation. We picked them up very low before their big buyout. Medicines company MDCO was bought last year as one of our most successful recommendations by Novartis. We believe we have many current recommendations that can be big winners also. Esperion, ESPR, has just received approval for a new cholesterol pill, particularly for those that are resistant to statins. This could be a huge market opportunity. We'll discuss them later in the presentation. Madrigal, MDGL, is a leader in developing a pill for NASH, non-alcoholic hepatitis. This is a large market opportunity that's barely been touched. There's been no treatments developed till very recently, and we believe there's a tremendous opportunity, and Madrigal, we believe, is as best-in-class drug. NKTR, Nectar, is another Bay Area local company based in Mission Bay here in San Francisco. They are potentially what we think is groundbreaking technology in the cancer space. It's very important. They've also been validated significantly by Bristol Myers, who's one of the world's leaders in immune oncology. Nectar's drug is an immune oncology drug, which basically works with your immune system, re-engineers it or turns it back on to attack and remove cancer from your body. This is an incredible breakthrough, and particularly it appears that they work with the Keytrudas or the PD-L1 inhibitors, which have been basically almost miracle drugs in a subset of patients. So we're very excited about Nectar. Sangamo, SGMO, is a historic recommendation. My father was the one that recommended Sangamo. They are another Bay Area company. They are one of our favorites. We'll discuss them today also. At the end of the presentation, they have cell therapy, gene therapy, and gene editing. We believe their suite of technologies is probably the most comprehensive in the world for those cell and gene therapy plus gene editing. Their zinc finger technology has very strong intellectual property and has generated significant partnerships, which we will discuss later in the presentation. PGEN, Precigen, is the former company that spun out with the Zyopharm and Trexon. Precigen is a leading gene therapy and cell therapy company, and has some very interesting cancer products that we will take a peek at the end of the presentation also. So we'll look at Esperion, Sangamo, and Precigen late in the presentation. That's myself, John McCamant, and my partner, Jay Silverman. As I said, I've been in biotech for over 30 years, worked throughout the industry, venture capital, managed healthcare funds, and currently run the newsletter and do some other consulting. And we work regularly with large media throughout the United States. Jay was senior biotech analyst, formerly ranked #1 in biotechnology by the Wall Street Journal when he was at Robertson Stevens, one of the original large biotech investor houses. He's frequently quoted on television and was a VP at Thorne Research, a leading natural products company, until joining us in 2013. Bioinvest.com is we put out a newsletter every 2 weeks, 24 issues a year. In addition, Bioinvest.com is our website where we can track and put out everything. We have a primary feature is BSA, is a biosector analysis that comes out in every issue. We go through the entire details of what's going on in the industry, whether our recommendations or not, and any of the impact. White papers are when we take an in-depth look or discussion into a specific disease or a new recommendation. Proprietary CEO insights are where we discuss who are the leaderships of these companies. As excited as we get about the science and the technology, at the end of the day, the individuals running these companies will be faced and make many important decisions. And more often than not, in our experience, it is excellent management that makes the biggest difference, and we can be access good technology if needed. Good technology does not always find itself with good management. MTSL archives are available online for our subscribers. Tremendous resource, particularly when we want to go back and look at different conferences or check out an older white paper. Comprehensive industry event calendar as we look forward to this week, as will be the ASCO abstracts. We'll discuss what will come out of those. Then we'll be anticipating the ASCO meeting, which is the largest cancer meeting in the first week of June. Investment philosophies laid out issue by issue, particularly in our specific company updates. We're able to give you or discuss exactly why and how we believe these are good investments. BSA, snapshot of the present, but most importantly, we're trying to look out and forecast. It's lots of great news and interesting things happen in biotech. We want to keep you abreast of what's gone on, but most importantly, we're trying to project going forward. Macro picture of the near-term state of the industry can be very positive to fully or very useful to understand what's going on throughout biotech. You can access this in one place. Definitely provides an assessment for investor sentiment. We're quite useful for understanding near-term future, what's moving the biotech stock market. And in addition, we're doing a lot of work on our charts and our technicals, and these can provide definitely some strong or good hints for traders and technicians for short-term trades and definitely sector moves. Major industry events. It's important to track all of these, particularly as we found in the COVID-19 era, as we want to fully keep you abreast of everything going on, and whether it's vaccine or drug development. Since the previous issue, we've really been chock full of information, or even with expected potential slowdown, we're finding that there's a tremendous amount of news that's continued to flow despite some of the challenges of working in a virtual society as we're doing today. Regulatory key FDA approvals, PDUFA dates, and data releases are some of the most important things we provide in the BSA, and also look at all of the different M&A and different deals, analysis, and what could be coming for some of our recommendations. Which themes are hot? Immune oncology is a particular area, and then obviously we're tracking everything going on with COVID-19. Technicals have become very important in this market, particularly as money's become more concentrated into larger hands, and it's important to know what the big money is doing. Support and resistance levels. These are all things as we keep seeing more and more of the markets driven by technicals. It's important to pay attention. Even the majority of our analysis will be fundamentals on the actual companies and the science. The technicals, and particularly the broad indexes, are a very important component that we want to keep fully abreast of. MTSL Clinical Trials Watch. In every issue, we will provide a list of new clinical trials and updates that are related to our recommended stocks. It's an incredible resource, clinicaltrials.gov. If any person that wants to know about any trial in any disease, it's a really neat resource, and particularly if you have somebody that might need treatment or want to look and explore some of the different options, this is a very good place to start, and will give you a complete lay of the landscape and exactly what's going on and where you might be able to find and get into trials. It's very important for us to track all of the competitive landscape, whether small, medium, or large. We want to know what's going on within the specific disease spaces for our diseases that our recommended companies are tackling. Here's a great example right here. Clearly, the Regeneron jumps out. AbbVie with some of the COVID-19 trials. Regeneron looks like they might be developing some very interesting antibodies. But as you can see, there's a lot going on in the space. I would also point out the Insight Lilly down there, as it looks like their approved drug, Jakafi, may be a really important treatment in the severe state of the disease, which is called cytokine storm. And in fact, that's exactly how the drug has been described for its 10, 15 years in development. So this is a classic case of a drug that's already approved or been in clinical trials, like the Gilead drug was, that allows it to immediately go into human testing for COVID-19. Any new molecules or new chemicals or drugs, antibodies, regardless, would have to go through an extensive preclinical testing process for safety. So this is one of the ways we can leapfrog drugs that are developed for COVID-19, is that they're already approved or have been cleared at least in human clinical trials, so they've been proven to be safe at a minimum. MTSL company updates. This is basically some of the meat of the newsletter, our newest analysis of our companies, our portfolio universe. This week we've been particularly busy with a lot of quarterly calls. That means next week's issue will have complete updates on all of those companies, at least 5 or 6 at this point. Clinical, regulatory, partnerships, competition, upcoming announcements, particularly things. ASCO is going to be very big, and we're getting some hints there. We want to analyze what we see in the present and predict the future. Looking ahead is what to expect, big and small picture, put our companies in context of our investments. 24 issues per year, keep you completely abreast and up to date of all our recommendations and the biotech industry. Easy to read. We pride ourselves on understanding the technology, but not being overdone, and it's putting in a layman's language so that you can understand exactly what is going on without too much technical jargon. White papers. Several times a year we publish in-depth white papers with the latest relevant themes of biotechnology. Hemophilia and gene therapy was a particularly important one. We think Sangamo and their partner Pfizer could be one of the world's leaders and provide a leading gene therapy for hemophilia A. Again, easy to read for the layman as well as a scientist, doctor, or industry executives. MTSL breaking news. Biotech has many events or things that have come out in between issues. When key events occur, we will send out a quick update. Recently was a Sangamo very large partnership with Biogen, basically one of the world's leaders in neurology. This was an excellent deal, and we went through all of those details on the day that news came out. We believe it's very important to have timely, in addition to value-added contact. And breaking news is you never know when, but if you see your things coming in our space, more often than not, you will have an email that show up that day to provide an up-to-date and timely value. It's very important to stay well-informed and up-to-date in the biotech industry, but especially on all of our recommended or your invested companies. Biotech blockbusters. This biotechnology continues or shows that they are almost all of the largest drugs in the world have been created by biotechnology. Humira, the anti-TNF drug, it's been approved at last count for 13 plus autoimmune indications. It has truly been a miracle drug with some side effects, but the balance has been a difference maker for many people with autoimmune disease. Arvoni is HCV, hepatitis C. It's a cure. So those kind of sales are very impressive, but they will go down over time as they literally eliminate their patient population each time they provide the drug, as they are curing patients and reducing the overall HCV patient population. Remicade is another monster anti-inflammatory. Rituxan was one of the original Genentech drugs, which is a B-cell cancer drug. Very large, originally a niche opportunity, has turned into the world's leading cancer drugs. Some very interesting ones I mentioned, Jakafi, which is approved for cancer, myelofibrosis, a cancer of the blood by Incyte. It's always had this unique mechanism of action where it was able to turn off or stop what's called the cytokine storm, which when it goes in, it's an over attack of your immune system. It appears to be, or it's been shown that this is one of the hallmarks of later stage COVID-19. And if you can turn off the cytokine storm, which is basically one of the last stages of the disease before you go on the ventilator, you would really be providing a tremendous tool, and also allowing people to know that even if they got the virus, if it gets worse, you have a tool that could literally prevent you from dying. We should have some Jakafi data coming out on that sometime soon. That would obviously boost some of their data, but it's already a nice growing cancer drug, as we mentioned before. Spinraza treats a rare neurological condition. It's usually diagnosed in children and teenagers called SMA. That has turned out to be a very nice blockbuster, and it's a classic what we would call orphan disease, where the patients number in the hundreds or low thousands, yet because of the tremendous benefit and also the large price, they're able to capture some very large economics. Spinraza is developed by a recommended company of ours, Ionis, I-O-N-S, and is partnered with Biogen, B-I-I-B, which is a world leader in neurology. And as we mentioned earlier, that was a very large neurology deal they just did with Sangamo. This was a much bigger deal last year for us, as key drug pricing is basically red meat. And rarely in the United States do we get bipartisan attacks. They have no problem going after drug pricing on all sides. We believe there's some relatively calmer heads at times moving forward with it, particularly with a new fresh political cycle coming this fall. We doubt it's going to be quite as heated as we'd expected, as we'll discuss going on throughout the presentation, but COVID-19 has really positioned the pharma and biotech industry as a savior and a big part of the solution. Joe Biden is definitely going to be easier on drug pricing than the Warren or Sanders or any of the Medicare for all. So while we will get the bipartisan tax, will come back. We don't expect it to be anywhere near as extreme as it had been in times last year, and it had been one of the reasons the biotechs had basically been slumping off and on before the COVID-19 put us into a complete tailspin. And now, as we'll show later on here in some of the charts, looks like a very large bounce in biotech and potentially a new leadership going forward. Historically, we've dealt with different tweets from different politicians about biotechnology, or even the Hillary healthcare decades ago. Biotech stocks have lagged the market, as I just mentioned, until the prowess in showing the potential and solutions for COVID-19. High drug prices bring throughout the primaries by everyone. We're always hard on drug pricing. The fact is that 15% or 1/5 represents pharmaceutical sales of the total United States healthcare spend. We're spending 85% on non-drugs. There's a huge amounts of healthcare spending going on in other areas. They're very high profile and will be subject to attacks, but high drug pricing allows for innovation. Drug prices do have to show that they have a benefit, so we've got no problem with any of those things, but as we're showing, it's the free market that allows us to develop new drugs and have drugs like Gilead's drug sitting on the shelf waiting, even though it failed in clinical development and did not make it for Ebola. It was still sitting there and was unable to be basically repurposed potentially here as a very helpful tool. In general, Trump has been pretty good for biotech, pro-business. Tax repatriation had been some positives. Regulatory, to be perfectly honest, been very happy with Trump. Scott Gottlieb, his first commissioner, was just excellent. You've seen him quoted regularly on the COVID-19 crisis, and he almost always provides sound, salient information. Our new commissioner, Dr. Hahn, comes from MD Anderson, world's largest and leading cancer center, very well-respected immuno-oncologist. Does bode well for one of our recommendations, Ziopharm, Z-I-O-P, as they have tremendous relationships, and their CEO is also an immuno-oncologist that came out of MD Anderson. The FDA remains critical for biotechnology investing. It's the ultimate gatekeeper to a huge marketplace of semi-monopolies once one gets across or over the goal line. Details continue to matter, and we've been impressed with allowing biosimilars on the market, and the agency did a very good job last year putting out gene therapy guidelines specifically for the Heme products. BioMarin should be the first to the market by year end, and then follow up with companies like the Sangamo Pfizer product, which we think gene therapy could be significantly better. Now we're going to talk about COVID-19. There's 4 main areas we're looking at in the space. Virus tests, just to actually know whether you have the test or the virus or not. Hundreds of millions will be needed for these on an annual basis. Antibody tests. These are very tricky. Able to test for previous infections, potentially check for asymptomatic status. Very important. There's percentage of people walking around spreading disease without knowing it, as they don't actually have symptoms or don't feel sick. Vaccine protection, this will be antibody titers. The only way, or one of the main ways we'll be able to measure and know whether a vaccine is potentially effective before it actually goes into disease patients is we can use these antibody tests to see if we've been able to stimulate or create sufficient antibodies to battle or create a successful vaccination. Treatment, very important. Gilead's remdesivir is the first part of the solution. Direct quote from Dr. Fauci is this is a piece of the puzzle as we've been treating HIV with a cocktail of drugs, as many as 3 or 4. Potentially, this is what we'll be doing with COVID-19. And in fact, this morning, some of the first data came out with an antiretroviral, a 3-drug combination. It looks interesting already. So we're really trying and throwing all of our different tools, and because of our experience dealing with some of the previous viruses, we're able to understand how we might be able to treat and hopefully vaccinate. This is probably going to be the trickiest. It's a clear holy grail, very important, but without question, it's the hardest of the 4 to develop by far. And we'll discuss here in a couple slides some more details on that and why we think there's tremendous challenges there. Virus tests are still lacking. Hundreds of millions will be needed annually. Very important tool for the information. We didn't even know where and how the virus. It's basically a tracking tool. We're going to need more of these going forward, as potentially we're going to have a second and or third wave of the virus. So this is basically technical and manufacturing. When you combine virus testing with contract tracing, track every single patient who comes with a disease and find out who they've been in contact, again, allows for much more information. Together, the virus test and the contact tracing allow us to start to open the economies back up and potentially re-shut them down or partially shut down our areas, as we can track and know where, if the virus does come back hot, is it going to be probably a second and third wave. Antibodies to test for previous infection and the asymptomatic status, the vaccine protection, or whether you have antibodies. Another factor is very important, and we're not sure if it's going to happen with this virus, but the flu vaccine has to be changed basically every year because the virus mutates and has what we call antigen drift. So the antibody test will allow us to broadly test and find out what antibodies are present and what have been potential mutations. Asymptomatic disease status would be extremely important. Right now, the estimates 20 to 60% of people are potentially harboring the virus without showing or being sick. The antibody tests are the potential green cards. If the antibody test can be accurate, we need them to be in the 99 percentile. It's very important we don't get false positives. Current tests use blood, making it a little trickier, even if it's just a prick. Saliva may be easier. In addition, COVID-19 may be more prevalent in the mucosa than blood, and that's where we primarily are get exposed and the virus enters the body. So there could be some potential changes or saliva there also. So antibody tests have been basically a real mess, Wild West show as far as the FDA has let almost anybody on the market. This will start to change. Roche has taken classic leadership. They're one of the world's leaders in diagnostics and developing antibody tests. They're going to be able to make potentially up to 100 million a year once they get full production going, and they've been able to show 99% accuracy to date. So that's very, very important. But the antibody tests are clearly going to have to be done by the very large pharmaceutical or biotech companies that have the capacity to do them right and make them safely. Treatments. Gilead's remdesivir is clearly the first part of the solution to the puzzle, similar to AZT, where we use 3 different medications to keep the virus at bay. One unique component of HIV, those are, even though we keep it out of the majority of the bloodstream, more often than not, the HIV is still in the body, hiding in the different HIV reservoirs. We're really showing that the FDA is stepping up to get these things to the market very fast, but as importantly, they have to go through some sort of human testing. And as I mentioned earlier, drugs that are already on the market or have been in human trials already can be at least almost immediately put into a human clinical trial, certainly fast tracking the process and eliminating all the animal or preclinical testing. INSEE's Jakafi has potential to treat cytokine storm, has a very good safety profile, and then uniquely, even though most people associate cancer drugs with IVs, or it is a pill, which makes it more flexible than an IV treatment, and also more widely distributed out into the community hospitals. We've been impressed with the initial data for the Regeneron antibodies, which potentially have a ability to work as a therapeutic with higher doses of the antibodies, and may even have a prophylactic or almost a vaccine-like effect where you're using maybe smaller doses of the antibodies. As I mentioned this before, this capacity to fast track immediately in the human clinical trials is important, as it's almost impossible to skip preclinical testing with a potential compound. We can't put these things into humans and have them kill people when we could have basically done that with our proper animal and preclinical testing. The hydrochloroquine obviously got a lot of hype. One of the things, there was some very simple science behind it, is it has what's called a very small therapeutic window. The drug was being dosed, or looked like, from 400 to 600 milligrams twice a day, so basically a gram or a gram 0.2. The lethal dose in the literature is 2 grams. That is just way too small a window to try and get an effect. The drug can be used in the hospital setting, but you have to monitor it extremely closely. And it's just clearly, if that drug had been such a great antiviral agent, it would have been used in other, as an antiviral in the past. We've already been moving forward beyond that, and we expect that at this point that we're going to be able to treat COVID-19 with a cocktail of some sort. There's literally hundreds of companies making claims on the treatment. They're very difficult to find the investment angle there, but when you can, Gilead is an interesting company, but Insight is one of the cleaner investments for COVID-19 now, is they have potential to be a real winner in the space, but they have a core drug approved and a whole pipeline, so that it's almost a free wild card to have any COVID-19 success in Insight. Vaccines are the absolute holy grail. However, sobering facts. Fastest timeline for a vaccine in history is 4 years for the mumps. HIV vaccine has eluded Fauci and the scientific community for 30 plus years. We're really not even close. So as much as the media and a lot of us are hanging our hopes on if this 1 year we'll have an HIV vaccine, well, we may have a vaccine. Its effectiveness, very tricky. We just don't know if we're going to be able to get one. And one of the keys to vaccines is having the right conserved target. We've already been getting some reports on mutation. So theoretically, we could develop one of these new vaccines. It could be rushed to the market, could be safe, maybe have some effectiveness, but the virus could mutate, making it completely or minimizing the value of the vaccine. So we really wish that this was more straightforward, but it's very tricky. In addition, RNA and DNA vaccines have yet to be approved for the market. So we're really out on the kind of wild edges of the frontier, and they're really doing everything to help move these things forward, but particularly because of the safety component that means vaccines are given to healthy individuals. Their safety profile has to be absolutely pristine, let alone all them anti-vaxxers and just all the controversy about vaccines that we have in the United States already. Moderna is moving rapidly forward. They believe they're going to get into phase 3 trials by the start of the summer. To date, they've been able to show that they're getting some of the antigens, but we have seen this before in other trials and other diseases, RSV in particular, where we've seen very nice titer levels and not a successful vaccine. University of Oxford, combination with the Jenner Institute, has their vaccine, which had started last year in a different coronavirus, has been validated through the large pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca. They should be out of phase 1 and into phase 2 relatively soon. Pfizer's just started theirs with a very interesting biotech company. J&J is working with BARDA, lots of other big players. Inovio and Novavax have trials underway, but almost all of their stock price wrapped up until we see significant volatility and don't quite feel we have an investment in the vaccine space yet. We also suspect some major short squeezes. We would love for these to work, but to date, they've not shown that there's going to be any efficacy from the vaccine space. Going forward, we're looking through not going forward, we've also been doing this for a couple of months, but we've been vetting all of the COVID-19 questions and companies in 3 main areas for the MTSL recommendation: potential impact on revenue, supply chain inventory, potential impact on clinical trials, and potential impact on the buy-ins, or basically stocking/hoarding, quarter 1 earnings, and potential impact on catalysts through 2020. The impact in the revenue supply chain inventory has been modest to date. Revenue will be impacted in specific names, but they can bounce back pretty fast. Particularly the biotech focus on oncology and orphan drugs has helped, as severely diseased patients are less likely to miss treatment. Cancer and MS are great examples of diseases with minimal impact from COVID, as despite the treatments needing to be infused in a hospital setting, the patients are still coming in and receiving treatment. Clinical trials are going to be a different situation. And some of the things like oncology, again, an orphan disease, with the trials that are ongoing, we're seeing the patients are still going in for their visits, and particularly with their in addition to telemedicine, they're skipping the non-drug visits, or they don't need to go in for consultations. But when they do go in, they get the treatment. However, most new trials will be delayed until COVID-19 recedes, as they kind of have their hands full managing the trials that are ongoing, and it's harder to get patients to commit with all of the uncertainties. Telemedicine has adapted significantly, where we even had a specific disease sectors where they've been using zero telemedicine, or well above 50% already. And it's probably something that was going to happen, or was already a nice change, but potentially provide some cost savings. But it's a nice adaptation, and it's really nice to see technology helping. FDA has been incredibly positive, as they've already shown significant flexibility in clinical trial protocols. For example, they're very stringent. The protocols call for specific patient visits in the office that have been replaced by telemedicine. The FDA has been signing off on these left and right. It's amazing for a government agency to be this flexible, but I think they understand that this is one of the most important areas of any government agency, and they're rising to the occasion regularly here during the last couple of months. Potential impact on 2020 catalyst does remain to be seen. However, the FDA, not only have they been granting approvals on time, they've more often than not, they've been putting them out ahead of the PDUFA dates. So this is very important, as significant FDA delays, particularly on individual companies, could be very difficult. Deals are being struck. Esperion just did a Japanese deal with Otsuka. Telephones, I'm not even talking faxes, but just all of these documents, lawyers, things are all being done electronically. It's very nice to see that they can manage and keep moving forward. And obviously these negotiations could have started pre-COVID, but there's no reason new negotiations can't start. But the capacity to close the deal is probably most important, as that means all the actual final details are being managed completely in an electronic world across the globe. Scientific conferences are being held virtually with full data presentations and be completely accessible for both scientists and Wall Street. ASCO and other key meetings have been going on. ADA, EHA, they'll all be very interesting. But to date, we've been seeing full data disclosures, stock moves, good questions. Companies able to hold virtual meetings. So we're really moving forward in the virtual world, and we're taking advantage of the technology. We've seen, we believe M&A has always been a classic investment theme in biotech, is when your company gets bought out overnight for sometimes a 100% premium. It's a very exciting and a classic. Biotechnology does the majority of the heavy lifting or develops drugs, and more often than not, as they get close to the market, or often they get bought, and the larger companies fill in and augment their pipelines. Drugs and later, the most attractive M&A is always going to be drugs on the market, as the big players can plug and play and put these drugs, have them become accretive right to their bottom lines. Drugs and later development to augment pipelines are always going to be attractive, and particularly if they can get more than one or drug candidate or a platform. Patent expiration is a major reason for M&A, and it will continue to be as drugs start to come off patent. You need to fill in your pipelines. R&D innovation is always going to be critical, and as where big pharma can rely on most of the innovation to come from the biotech industry. The COVID-19 impact on cash. Pre-commercial companies will not have as much access to the capital markets, and maybe not on their terms. So we'll see them start to run low on cash, and the the cash-rich global players will take advantage, and specifically with the bolt-ons. Two huge deals last year was the Bristol Myers Celgene and the Lilly Loxo. We just finished the week before all the major quarterly calls from big pharma and big bio. They got huge cash hoards, and they're looking to make big moves all the time. Amgen has made 30 plus acquisitions in their history. Last week we saw two very nice 100 plus premiums, Alexion Portola and Meninari and Stem. So just in the last week, we saw very nice premium buyouts that always keep us interested and excited in the space. M&A high, access for innovation, gene therapy, gene editing, cell therapy, immune oncology. These are all areas that are extremely interesting to big bio and big pharma. You can see the cash. It's ridiculous. These cash hoards just get bigger every quarter. And it's the classic way of big pharma and the blue chips will fill in their pipelines. Biotech is clearly part of the solution for COVID-19 and any future threats. We're always going to have a huge need for the diagnostics, drugs, and vaccinations. Investors had shunned biotech for 2+ years with all the drug pricing fears and election rhetoric. The pandemic counters this negativity by shining a positive light on the industry and its tremendous potential to be part of the solution. Good drugs will be used and paid for. Profitable big biotech stocks have gone from market PE discounts to market multiples since February. This has historically been our case, in that the big bios have always commanded a premium for the pipeline. The XBI is looking excellent here, and we definitely feel we're poised for breakouts as this after the major market sell-offs, as biotech has clearly been one of the better sectors. XBI is catching up to the NASDAQ. We're very impressed with that. M&A will remain an important trigger for SMID. COVID-19 will also make it a little harder to raise money, so we expect this spending spree to start, and we're already seeing good signs of it. Biogen, Gilead, Alexion have all had setbacks or slowdowns in key drugs. So they are particularly high on the list of shoppers. Global demographics, demand rising, pricing environment still decent for drugs. So we think the biotech and drug industry is poised to continue to recover. Secular industries have never been better. We know more about the diseases and targets than ever before. COVID-19 has vividly illustrated this. Industry pipelines, whether it's immune oncology, targeted cancer, NASH, orphan drug, neurology, tremendous opportunity. World prescription drug sales are going to be $1 trillion this year and growing. COVID-19 will not have an impact and could actually increase drug sales going forward. I'm going to skip this slide so we can get ahead to some of our other company positions here. But clearly there's a huge amount of cash and a huge amount going into R&D. MBI here with tremendous bounce. Talking about all the different technology platforms that we're excited about going forward. BioMarin and gene therapy and Sangamo, CAR-T like Precigen and Xiopharm. Sangamo also has their teeth in there. The T-cell or immuno-oncology space, 5', Insight, Nektar, Precigen, Xiopharm, all very interesting companies. Antisense, the Ionis, the former ISIS, and in the gene editing, we're very much like the Sangamo or the SGMO. Great platform technology. We want breadth and depth, management execution, good intellectual property, benefits, sound and multiple partnerships, lower risk through diversification, significant financial benefits, infrastructure benefits, clinical, regulatory, more opportunities for management to execute. License out your initial compounds in a platform, prove or get some cash and validate the technology, retain full rights in following compounds to create much larger growth. Multiple MTSL platform companies in the space. Alkermes, long-acting antipsychotics, 5' next generation monoclonal antibodies and proteins, Insight, small molecules, Ionis, antisense, Nektar, sustained release of polymers in the immuno-oncology space, Sangamo, discussed a couple times, gene editing and gene and cell therapy, and then cell therapy for cancer, Xiopharm and Precigen. Behind every pipeline, great intellectual property, which creates partnerships. The management delivers those partnerships. Cash comes from that execution through the partnerships. Pipelines equal catalysts. Lifeblood of biotech and represent value-creating opportunities. Deep pipeline allows for more catalysts. Data is key and positive data. Clinical data almost always adds value and represents advances in development. Partnerships are vital for the validation and infrastructure support and diversifies risk. Platform companies used to sell all of their potential drugs and just try to move forward with their tools. That's changed significantly in the last 20 years. They execute better now, and they understand that the key is not selling tools, but we need drugs to move forward. Precigen is one of our favorites here in the immunotherapy space. This slide shows how they're taking an extremely expensive initial CAR-T therapy, which is basically taking cells out of your body and re-engineering them to fight the cancer. It's as long as a 60-day process on the left and leads to what ends up being a very only small subset of patients and at least $500,000 for treatment. This is being simplified significantly with the Ultra CAR-T, basically overnight manufacturing process done in the hospital or at the same setting. This is night and day and would also allow us to basically bring this to a much larger set of cancer patients and also bring the price down significantly into what is a traditionally very good cancer drug sell in the $100,000 to $150,000 range. This is certainly a potential, and CAR-T will finally add as a potential cure for cancer or for some very positive long-term outcomes without chemo, radiation, or any negative side effects, as you basically have a new and better immune system. Company is poised for significant data readouts. While a lot of times phase 1 data is not important in biotech, and phase 1 data in cancer, it can be very important as cancer drugs are all tested in actual cancer patients for phase 1 and not in healthy volunteers. Ovarian cancer is very interesting along with the AML, but we just started the HPV and solid tumor trial. That is very interesting, and all 3 of the cancer programs will have data by year end in addition to our the type 1 diabetes program, and the heart failure. So this is a very interesting year for Precigen. They have enough cash to get through many data readouts here. So second half of 2020 could be very big for Precigen. Esperion is a lipid management company. They call themselves. Many of these scientists and founders came out of the old Warner Lambert, which discovered Lipitor. They have just gotten their first 2 drugs approved for cholesterol. And many people believe that cholesterol is already a well-served market and that statins, particularly generic statins, serve the market well. As we're show here some of the details. 8.7 million patients don't get enough LDL lowering despite statins. 9.6 million patients are statin intolerant. Statins are not the best drugs for all patients. So there's a huge opportunity. Just a quick estimate, 18 million patients could be use a new anti-cholesterol pill. Nexletol and Nexlizet are the approved drugs. Very interesting, are very clean medications, pills. Pricing appears to be very aggressive and $4,000 or below per year. This was right in the price range that turned Lipitor and all the statins into blockbuster drugs, and is an excellent pricing strategy compared to the PCSK9s, which have an excellent LDL lowering, but were priced in the $12,000 to $15,000 range and have had a horrible uptake into the markets as they were clearly mispriced. Esperion's learned from this, and they'd always wanted the price down in these ranges, as this is, they believe, is where you can sell blockbuster anti-cholesterol medicines in this $3,500 to $5,000 range. Drugs are both recently approved. They're going with a virtual launch and moving forward and meeting the challenges. As I mentioned earlier, they've done a large partnership with a different Japanese company for Europe, thank you, but they also were able to execute the Otsuka Japanese partnership virtual in the last 2 weeks. So very impressive to see them able to move forward and work in a virtual world and launch their drug in a difficult environment. Sangamo is, we believe, a world leader in the cell and gene therapy and gene editing. One of the ways to evaluate some of the more exotic or cutting-edge technologies to look for external validation from significant partners. As you can see with Sangamo, they've done a very good job of partnering with different companies. Pfizer and Heme A as the lead asset, and we'll discuss that in one of the next slides. The Biogen IDEC neurology partnership, where they got the $125 million plus the $225 million equity investment, is a monster investment and a hugely validating deal. Not just the terms or the targets and excellent royalties, but the fact that Biogen IDEC has become a true leader in neurology through the MS leadership, and also the Spinraza drug and other different orphan drugs, orphan areas. They definitely are the world's leader, and having had their problems, as they've had multiple setbacks in Alzheimer's, it's very interesting to see them step up here with Sangamo as they plan to have the Sangamo be one of the potential groundbreaking therapeutics for Alzheimer's. This is importantly the Heme A data, and most importantly, the bottom subjects in blue are the high dose. And with the one exception, we've had 0 bleeds. And this is the data that we are looking to get sometime in the next, maybe as long as 2 months, but we're thinking this data could come in the next month. This will be the durability data. And if this data is positive and showing that they've kept the bleeds down and it's durable, this we believe will differentiate it significantly from BioMarin in the Heme A space. And this is potentially the first gene therapy blockbuster, in our opinion, and would be highly anticipated data. It's already been moved into phase 3. They started that last October as Pfizer basically is foreshadowing to us that what they see with these patients is very good. They're getting good durability, no safety issues, and starting the phase 3 before putting out the phase 2 data is a very positive development in our mind and is a very strong foreshadow. We think this will be a significant catalyst for Sangamo and a game changer in the heme space. The ability to come at each of these different genetic or cellular problems with the different tools really differentiates Sangamo in our view. The zinc finger proteins are one of the best protected and fully owned intellectual property. Broad portfolio of rare and large indications across many different diseases, including cancer, CNS, and hematology. They've made significant investments in-house as the gene therapy, cell therapy. There's almost constantly making small improvements, and the need to keep this and be able to manage it, as most of the larger companies don't have the capacity to make or do the specific technology of a gene or cell therapy, so it's important you do this yourself. Sangamo spent the last 2 years putting all of these in place, and that also, we believe, is one of the reasons the Biogen partnership came to fruition. Is that Biogen needed to know that they could also make this, not just have the technology backing it up. Excellent balance sheet with the excellent validating partners in Biogen, Kite, Pfizer, Sanofi, and Takeda. Biotech is almost 40 years old. The Genentech IPO. My father was at that IPO that day in 1983. We believe biotech is delivering on its promise over the next 25 years. Demographics demanded as we got an aging population throughout the world. Technology and innovation create the opportunities. COVID-19 cements the critical need of biotech as part of the solution, creating new tools as we move forward. As there will be more infectious threats or more situations for biotech to show and provide the tools and answers, and also incredible investments going forward. MTSL, over 60 years of combined experience, uniquely positions us to provide quality, unbiased investment advice. Went through our portfolio performance. We've delivered significant double-digit performance, 6 out of 7 years. Significant biotechnology exposure or discussion about the entire industry, breaking news, white papers. We believe we provide everything you need to successfully invest in the biotech sector. 15% off everybody who subscribes to MTSL uses the JM15 code. And I want to thank everybody at the Silicon Valley chapter of the American Association of Individual Investors for being here today.
I noted on a broadcast out of Germany a few days ago that they had done testing that had indicated that 22% of those who were infected by the COVID-19 virus were 100% had no symptoms at all, and felt and had no, were contaminating people and didn't realize that. And the second part of the study indicated that the death rate, at least from the German data, was 0.37. I wonder if you'd comment on those numbers and how do they compare with others you've heard?
Great question, Lynn. So basically, the asymptomatic component of the disease is, we just really have not had that happen. So we're basically have a typhoid Mary situation where people are spreading disease without knowing it. I think the antibody tests will be critical to date. Been a lot of controversy about some of the data they've generated. We're gonna, particularly with the Roche, or a much better test, we're gonna get our arms around that. But that's just critical to understand who has the disease or doesn't, and can it still be spread. And this has tremendous economic importance, as this is the one way we're going to allow ourselves to move forward. As far as it being potentially less lethal, that makes sense as we get better reporting. And there's been a substantial amount of patients or people that have probably had COVID, particularly with the lesser severe disease, didn't get hospitalized or tested, Lynn. So again, we just got to test though, because we can get more information. The more information we have, the better understanding of this. And partial and good news potentially is that it may be less lethal, which would be a positive.
So there's a question on COVID-19 from our audience, Will and Kathy. BioAmerica has a test that other countries are testing for antibodies. Why isn't the US trying this?
Not sure if they have capacity to even put it into the US. Right now, they're not making enough tests in the US though. There's no barrier, so if that company had the capacity, they could have it here. The FDA has already approved everything, but 95% is not very good on an antibody test. It might be okay for the initial virus test, but the antibody test is critical, and Roche's, we need to be in the 99 percentile. But the other thing is that manufacturing is not easy or fast in this area. So my guess is that they don't, whether or not it's been proven and it's highly effective, they can't probably make enough of it anyhow at this point.
Great. And then we have a range of, folks who are either comfortable with investing in the biotech space or not. So on the one side, are there any bio ETFs or mutual funds that you like rather than picking individual stocks?
At this point, there's not one that we're comfortable with, because the problem is by not being able to do your individual stock selection, we believe you can miss out on the big winners. The pharmaceutics, Madrigal did very great for us. We believe you can basically create your own ETF with using the different tiers and the diversification, and stock selection we think is just critical, and there's not one of those that has ever stood out for us. And we think biotech's a unique area, and it doesn't always lend itself to that type of investing because of the uniqueness, or if you can miss some of the absolute true home runs of the best companies.
Got it. And then on the other range from Raman, how do you help a day trader in terms of recommendations? I guess, is there an index of biotech stocks that might be good for day trading?
Well, that's why we would want to track the broad indices, and you can play some of those. We leverage them with some of the different funds or options if you think it's a bit. And because of the technicals are so widely used in biotech, we're not going to have specific day trading advice, but you would use those different charts, indices, and all the different information historically and our projections. We believe we could help you with some of them. Biotech tends to have some very strong rallies, and there are some very good momentum plays from time to time.
Great. So just to clarify then, in your stock recommendations, would you primarily look at fundamental, technical, or regulatory perspective? What's your primary focus?
Fundamentals primarily, particularly the science, validation, management. Have they done this before? Technicals to some extent, stocks can get ahead of themselves, but we're primarily going to be fundamentally based and basically try and get as many or compare apples to apples, and that's how we're going to compare the different companies and look for the winners in the space.
Great. And then we have another question here, which is, looks like Gilead, the stock price started to come down after their drug was approved for COVID use. Any comments on why you think it's come down?
So that's probably the best example of we've been having a problem finding investments in COVID-19 as they've all turned into trades or hedges. So Gilead, they sold their news, which is very good news, but it was the stock had gone up previously on leaked data that wasn't even as good. So they delivered the goods with a 30% improvement in the double-blind situation. It really did what they needed to do to show that it worked. And the stock sold off when the hype of it going up was also tricky because from the start they said they were going to donate the drug. So there wasn't going to be a big hit to their bottom line. Maybe they can start selling it at a profit down the road. But it was a classic. Sometimes in biotech, we do get a sell the news. But Gilead really did something phenomenal, created data in less than 2 months, and in a really tricky environment when they got 2 trials leaked on them, which is usually extremely verboten in the drug development world, and basically all that data would have been thrown away. But they were able to get the other trial over. But when we were first asked about this 2 months ago, we suspected Gilead would come up with some things because they have so many different drugs or drug candidates in their broad use against the different antivirals, Hep C, HIV. They're just truly a leader in the antiviral space. So going forward, Gilead probably is going to be a winner from COVID one way or another. But as you can see, it's been really tricky to invest per se and feel comfortable with these wide swinging trades, even in $100 billion name like Gilead.
Just to clarify, did you say Gilead would or would not be a winner in the COVID space?
They should be a winner in this space. They execute very well over the years. The primary problem with Gilead for the last 3 years is they did such a good job developing the HCV cure, they don't have any patients left to sell the drug to. It's a treatment, one time, done. So it's an irony, but it's also the goal of the biotech and drug industry is to create cures for untreatable diseases.
Great. Thank you, John. The next question comes from Mary. What is the best COVID antibody test in terms of sensitivity and specificity?
Great question. We believe it's Roche at this point, 99+% specificity. 95% is very good in the medical biotech world. That's what the p-value of 95% representations in the p0.5. But maybe even in the virus testing, because you could retest quickly. But with the antibody test, they need to be 99+% accurate. They're highly technical, and the manufacturing is going to be tricky, and the scale up. So basically, the Roche CEO had some very interesting quotes. One of them was, "Me and you can make this antibody test in the garage, just good scientists, but they're actually getting the best ones with the right antigens, and then being able to scale up is tremendously difficult." So thank God we have the large pharmaceutical companies with large manufacturing capacity like Roche that are going to be able to step in and make this happen. But we are monitoring that space closely. It is, as I mentioned earlier, the Wild West with the FDA. There's no approval process. You can just start selling them.
Got it. I'm going to unmute you, Roland, if you want to ask your question directly.
Yeah, sure. Brian, I was just curious about your perspective as an analyst of this industry. I have heard that oftentimes in different parts of the world, that they might have alternative kinds of treatments that are typically lower cost than, what the products that big pharma would provide. Like for instance, I had heard, for instance, in parts of Europe, they use ozone to treat, different types of cancer, whereas in the United States, it's often, not always, but often, ultimately the treatment regimen is going to be chemotherapy and a regimen of, a cocktail of different drugs. And, I guess, I wanted to get your perspective as how much of does big pharma kind of act in kind of keeping the lid on, maybe alternative lower cost kinds of treatments versus like a, something, kind of taking something through a full pipeline and FDA approval and all that.
Well, maybe fish oil is a good example. Amarin went through the process of getting it approved as a drug, and it started off with some modest sales, but they also then ran long-term clinical trials called outcomes, and they were able to show that it reduced mortality, so that a simple natural product, but that with some different formulations and different work. But with the testing, they were able actually to prove that. I don't believe that there's many low-priced drugs that are basically, when you know people with serious disease, when they get cancer and they're smart or they have access, and I've seen this pre-internet almost, but the amount of information that they will try and find, and they will, people were going to Mexico to take, the apricot pits, derivatives of things. So people want, but I don't think there's any simple, cheap way to treat cancer, for example. That's just not reality. Chemotherapy and radiation are horrible choices, but we're getting much better choices. And for example, cancer used to just be described as kidney cancer or liver cancer in the body part. Well, now they're really trying to describe it by its molecular signature. So different cancers express different molecular targets potentially in different parts of the body. But particularly with like the PD-L1 drug, which don't work for all patients, but the subset, 25-30% of patients, they return on your immune system to attack your cancer. That's not chemo, that's not radiation, it's actually literally they call it immune oncology because they've returned your immune system on. So I really believe that, you know, we've had these suspicions about cancer and the immune system 30 years ago, but it took all this long science and all this different process to get us to this point where we're understanding these things now. So I wish, you know, it was that simple, but we literally do have companies that are searching the rainforest looking for, you know, natural products. But that the drug development process, and because of the need for safety in the FDA, it's never going to be a quick, easy process to go find some root or bark or something that's going to change the world. But we're trying and looking for new things all the time. So great question. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Chirag, which is, do you only evaluate public companies, or do you also look at private companies before they IPO?
Great question. So we're not going to kill ourselves looking at the pre-IPO company, but we're going to put it into any sort of context or perspective of, is it interesting for when it does come public for an investment, but also in the competitive landscape, since most pre-IPO companies will at least be putting things or starting to have things in the clinic, so we can check or do some of the evaluation there. But yeah, more often than not, we're going to be well aware of, you know, what are the more sexy or exciting pre-IPO companies, and that's also, we're starting our homework there, but we're, you know, you can't make the investment call. But yes, particularly also as we've seen the industry mature, so that we have companies or the management teams get recycled, and you see an experienced management team or somebody that's had some success, those are going to be very, we're going to evaluate those pre-IPO, and then we're also going to look at the different investors pre-IPO as which funds are in them, because certain funds have been far more successful, and ones that we know personally, those will be how we'll do our pre-IPO evaluation per se.
Thank you. There's a question from William. For small biotech companies that have no production capability, are there some production partners that they prefer to go with?
Great question, and then we just got a little news bit on that earlier in the week, as Moderna teamed up with a Swiss company called Lonza. Lonza is just this incredible manufacturing genius, Swiss company, great protocol, safety, etc. So yeah, those are companies, and then historically they contract manufacturing organizations, CMOs are what they're called, but manufacturing can be very complex in the life sciences, and there is a subset or an industry that does that, and that is a great question. And more often than not, you don't want a small company spending a huge amount of money, or early in the development spending too much money on manufacturing. It's getting the cart ahead of the horse, as we want the drug to have more chance or higher odds of approval. However, when you get into cell and gene therapy, and these are one-time treatments, it's so critical and important in manufacturing this genetic material that it does need to be done a little earlier rather than later. And you don't want to actually be putting that out of house because it's so technical. But standard day-to-day things like making an anticlonal antibody, if you had that in development, you could outsource that to Lonza in a second.
Great. And then a question from Nasser. Any thoughts on Bausch Health Company, which is, I think, the ex-Valiant?
I think you stumped me on that one. But if you had some information and you wanted to send me, you can send it at john@bioinvest.com, and I can check into that for you.
Great. And then a question from Lori. You said new trials are on hold. Can you comment on the impact of the ongoing non-oncology trials? I know of several that are seeing enrollments drop to near zero.
Good observation. So Naptar was a great example. 358, a compound that's an anti-inflammatory, looks really good in lupus. We're going to get the data, but their partner Lilly will not start that trial until we get some clarity on what's going on with COVID-19. So basically, chronic disease, non-critical, those are going to be the ones that are going to have the most problems starting. There actually are starting some oncology trials, but basically, we're seeing that ongoing trials are going to have some slowdown, but it's going to be in those areas. So if I'm in a rheumatoid arthritis trial or a chronic disease, I'm not going to die if I step out of the trial. So that we're going to have those, some of those will, and we've seen those stocks impacted. But in oncology, if you on your treatment there, or the MS, you're not going to miss your infusion. Orphan disease, most of those are ongoing, but most of the companies are doing a pretty good job of being transparent, and this has been a lot what's been going on in different conference calls and discussion points in the last couple of weeks is what and where, what's going to keep going and what isn't. But MD Anderson, for example, is still treating an awful lot of cancer patients, but they're not going to be really starting new cancer trials right now.
Got it. What do you think about AbbVie's new acquisition?
We haven't done any homework on that yet, but AbbVie's been a pretty shrewd acquirer over the years, and we're very pleased with their acquisition of the PCYC at whatever, $257, I believe, and we recommended that at $17. But once they've been bought, it's not that we don't pay attention because we want to know what's going on, but our investment homework is done.
ASCO and other events usually have breaking news. Do you send out alerts from those conferences to your subscribers?
Great question, and thank you for your compliment. Yes, we will. And yes, so breaking news at ASCO or new data, we will put out an update that day. One small positive caveat is that there used to be a game that short sellers would play at ASCO of spreading rumors at different poster sessions.
Oh.
Impossible to do in a virtual world. But we've been very impressed with the way the data is being disseminated, and they're still able to hold the forums or conferences, and just, so the thought leaders can still get up there and do a virtual conference in the evenings like they did at the past at ASCO to talk about all the different drug releases they've had during the day. All the press releases come out, so all the data is fully disseminated, and I think we're fortunate to be an industry that is adapting and has already been using a lot of electronic tools ahead of time.
Okay, and just a comment with a question. I invested in, Stericycle, who is a medical waste company. It seems to me that even if we have a treatment, this is going to go on for quite a long time. What would you think about Stericycle as a medical waste company as an investment?
It sounds very Peter Lynch-like. Also, the old theory with the gold rush is we're not going for the gold, but we'll sell the tools. Levi Strauss found a bunch of denim, made a bunch of jeans, made a fortune. Never went for the gold. But yes, suppliers can be an absolutely great way to come in an investment angle. I've heard of that company and know that it's certainly going forward. We're going to be more aware of treating and supplies and sterilization, very important. So no, that would be a classic COVID-19. The world has changed investment angle. We will be more aware of just being more sterile, and infectious disease is always a looming threat, and viruses in particular because of the ability to mutate. So that's a great angle and great idea, and we'll be looking for some of those ourselves. I want to thank everyone for coming today and taking part in the presentation. Great questions.